And look at here.
Yeah.
It takes the light in, absorbs it, and spreads it out. Now, I was up here with, it's like a salt lamp.
Yeah.
I was up here with Justin putting those handrails in last year, and he said, Bill, did you see this pocket knife? That's a pocket knife somebody set down and it crystallized.
Oh, wow. Wow. So there's a, okay.
That's a pocket knife under there.
Wow. So this is a pocket knife that became part of the formation.
Yeah.
The footage in this video was taken at the Onyx Cave just outside of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It's exactly what it looks like in the footage. It is a pocket knife and parts of a camera that are stuck in an ancient stalagmite.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, and I told you about the camera and it had flash cubes.
Yes.
Hunter looked and there's flash cubes on the rock and he couldn't get them out of here. They had adhered
Become
to the
part
rock.
of that.
Now, if you don't move very fast in here, you might come back. Now watch it when you stand up.
But that's what you were talking about at the age of the formations.
Yeah.
That they're actually young, because you wouldn't have a pocket knife in there if they were old.
No, and here's something you asked a while ago about age. I'm glad you said that.
Okay.
I read a study that 12 geologists with doctor's degrees made, and they studied the Grand Canyon.
The man that you're seeing talk there is a geologist. He's the one giving the tour. He began the tour by explaining what they commonly do on cave tours, that everything is millions and millions of years old and a galaxy far, far away is the start of every story. This man was unusual. He is a geologist.
Yeah.
And see, they're always taking the sedimentary rocks of the Grand Canyon that are stacked and trying to say, okay, this is this long ago, this is this long ago,
Right.
and the Grand Canyon's like several million years old.
Right.
Okay. Those geologists went in there with their doctor's degrees, and they were actually theologians too, and they proved 4 different ways that that's not true.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story here. Your headset said 1 inch every 100 years.
Yes.
I don't believe that either, because the water drips at different rates.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, some men went into a cave. They knew they needed water, so they put a barrel underneath a stalactite, which stalactites drip. Then they had a natural source of drinking water. When they got done with their work in their cave, they left. 80 years later, somebody went back in to try to find the barrel. Here's what happened. Stalactite drips. It
Yeah.
forms a base or stalagmite.
Okay.
It keeps dripping until they meet.
Yeah.
Okay? They couldn't find the barrel.
Because it was in there.
It's right there.
This footage that we have on the screen behind me, I came back to the Onyx Cave to examine this, what looks like an actual Swiss Army pocket knife, a foldable pocket knife that is caught in this stalagmite right here. There's a stalagmite. Here's the pocket knife right here on the screen. You can kind of see the layout of it. She's going to point her flashlight at it. The Onyx Cave staff were very, very helpful in allowing me to examine this knife and the angles of it. They have those stuck in stalagmites as well on the floor of the cave. But right here we see this outline, if you can see this, and I'm going to move the camera around it. This is a foldable pocket knife that has become part of the formation. Now, it's claimed that these formations take millions of years. Here in this particular instance, for whatever cause, you have a pocket knife that is inside of that stalagmite. Now I'd like to further note, and here I am putting my fingers up around it so you can sort of see the scope of the pocket knife that's stuck in the stalagmite. The bucket of water story that he's telling, it's actually in a different part of the cave systems that you have. But here normally caves give you the story of the millions and millions of years ago in a galaxy far, far away. But this particular cave was unique.
Okay. Okay. All right. So tell me about the fish.
Well, they used currents of water.
But what kind of fish are these?
They're
in
blind
the caves?
cave fish, and literally they're not rare. You can go to a pet store and buy them.
Okay.
But they look like regular fish, but they have no eyeballs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they travel by magnetism, electrification in the water, water currents.
But how did they do this? They tested this somehow?
I don't know how.
Well, they put it in the
Yeah.
cave,
Yeah.
and then it went.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it just follows the water currents and like electricity and magnetism.
Wow.
They don't have any eyes. They have no choice. They just got to travel the way they can.
And how far did they travel?
Probably 400, 500 miles
Wow.
underground.
So, but they meet with the other caves.
Yeah. There's
Okay.
a labyrinth of
Okay.
caves under the Earth's crust. You've heard of aquifers that carry water?
No.
Yeah,
What are
there's
they?
aquifers under the Earth's crust that they're like underground rivers.
Yeah.
And the aquifers actually follow the caverns too. So
Wow.
underneath the Earth's crust, and that's always concerned me about fracking. When they go into like Oklahoma up here, they did a bunch of fracking and exploded and put stuff down into the earth.
Yeah.
They have no idea what they're damaging, what they're getting into doing that.
Yeah.
And it's actually created earthquakes. Okay.
Wow.
The fracking creates earthquakes.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to finish this with telling you this. In 1985, Mount St. Helens erupted in the state of Washington. Huge
Yes.
volcano.
Yes.
Yeah, the ash flew for hundreds of miles. Well, I went to Blue Spring, just outside of Eureka. It's a spring that pumps millions of gallons of water a day. And they said when that occurred in 1985, the ash came out of that Blue Spring
So how would it get in there?
through the Earth's crust. Comes down, falls, maybe gets in a river, gets washed in the river, a creek, a stream, and then settles and then ends up in a cavern.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's 1985.
So caves are really underground water passageways. is what
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people say, well, how was caves created? I don't know how biblical you think, but theologically, this is what I think.
Now, the geologist there, named Bill, taking us over the rocks, clearly believes in a pre-flood world very much, as do I, Noah, and the flood, which creates the pre-flood world. He's going to talk some, so I've got a pterodactyl on the top of this film at God in a Nutshell behind me, like the pterodactyl on my desk. He's going to talk to me in a second about some issues dealing with bats. Bats are kind of often associated with the occult. Not that they're an occult animal, but they often get thrown in there in the witch's brew. Bats and spiders. Well, Aaron Judkins believes that the site, also alleged to be millions of years old, or at least tens of thousands, is Gobekli Tepe, where they have these T-shaped stones. Dr. Aaron Judkins, who gave us access to those labs, believes that those two stones right there, all of its ancestor worship, when you're dealing with those ancient cultures, going all the way back to the Tower of Babel, he believes that those T-stones right there in the heart represent Adam and Eve.
Now, a lot of people say, well, how was caves created? I don't know how biblical you think, but theologically, this is what I think. What was the biggest tragedy that ever occurred on the Earth's surface? What?
The flood.
The flood. And I don't care what country you go to, what nationality, they have a history that tells of a flood.
Yes.
Okay, just think about I get goosebumps thinking about this.
Yes.
These scientists talk about, the Grand Canyon's 6 million years old. No. What happened was during the flood, the water came from the surface of the earth, came clear to the top of the ground,
Yes.
and flooded the whole earth.
Yeah.
That's one time. Then it went back down.
Yeah.
Twice, huge volumes of water went through the earth's crust. Some of this rock was very soluble, and it washed it right out. And here's your caves.
Wow.
And that always gets me. And it's proven and it's not just Christian, it's not just Jewish. It's actually proven in all history. Like you go to Japan, China, any of these countries, and they've got a history of a great flood.
Well, so how long do the formations take in that instance? So the formations.
Okay, the formations. Now on
Okay.
your headset, remember that, because I got something, I got a little story to tell you about that up here.
Okay.
Now, the second biggest cave in the United States is Carlsbad Caverns.
Yeah.
I went there, you hear people talking, and they come walking from behind features like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. There's literally rooms. It's like an architect made the cave.
Yeah.
I went up to the ranger and I said, ma'am, I've been to 15 caves, never one like this. And she says, come to the bat flight tonight. Oh boy. The year was 2006. It was Halloween night. My wife and I went and sat in an amphitheater, and the ranger was over there with a microphone. They had speakers and microphones all through the cave. It's one of the national parks. If you ever get a chance, go to Carlsbad Caverns. And she starts talking about the cave. And she says, all of a sudden, she says, be quiet, listen. And you can literally hear the bats coming up out of the cave. At that time, they said 1 million bats every night.
Yeah.
Okay, I took this job last year, and I knew something. So I Googled it. Now there's only 300,000 coming out. What
Wow.
happened?
Yeah.
Same year, 2006, Albany, New York. They walked into a cave. There was dead bats littered on the floor with a white mucus all over them. The first time they identified the white nose syndrome. It came from Europe, European bats. It spread to American bats. People can actually spread it. I've been to private caves and they got a sign that says, do not enter. Sometimes you go to a tourist cave like this and they ask you what cave you've been to.
Wow.
Because they don't want you spreading the white nose syndrome.
Nonetheless, in any occult story, tracing all the way back to Babylon or the Tower of Babel itself, well, occult stories tend to contain bats. This story is no different. Let me move my pterodactyl guy right here.
The umbrella, it's amazing.
This is this cave that John took us to, and it's right here. The drone literally came down this cliff and landed right there on that rock. We couldn't get it to go over the lift. And there's John. This underground swell of this cave system. Tell me a little about it, John.
Snail Shell Cave, Rutherford County, Tennessee. This cave goes for about 14 miles that way, and then another 40 or 50 miles underwater. It goes a few miles this way. That's actually a river. You can kayak in. Tons of history here.
Now, when I first discovered this cave, this Onyx Cave, named after the onyx stones, here's a little black onyx stone that I have in my hand in this box right here. Donna Clement's husband, John Petruska, Donna Clement Petruska. Well, John had been exploring caves in really, really hardcore ways, and I went and I did this with him on several occasions in caves that were way out of the way in Tennessee. And we were at an event where Donna was speaking, and John came up, we got to talking, and he said, I don't know why the Lord is leading me through all these caves, and I don't know what I'm supposed to look for or find in there. And then John started telling me that it's harder for him to go to caves because they had been closing all of these caves down. They'd been closing down a lot of caves, and in John's view, call it conspiracy or not, but he had this gut feeling that there's something they don't want me to look at in these caves. And then he started talking about bats.
Crazy history here, and this isn't preserved by the state. This is a private people, and you can see why. It's pretty dangerous. Coming down and climbing down all that, there's a few spots you could die. It's really, really dangerous. This cave has taken people's lives over the years. A lot of people have died in here. When a flash flood comes and you're 5 or 6 miles in there ain't nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And one of the things about these systems like this in these caves are, if you were to get a minor injury, twist your ankle, and you can't get out, it takes a hell of a lot to get a team in here to get you out.
Now, this was several years ago that I went through my first cave with John. Well, my wife and I were coming back from that event where Donna spoke, and we passed this cave, this Onyx Cave. Onyx is one of the stones, by the way, in the high priest's breastplate. Onyx is for Manasseh. No, it's for Ephraim, one of the two sons. There's Manasseh and Ephraim, both these sons of Joseph, and Kim Clement called this a Joseph period. I'm driving back from this event, and I decide to go through this Onyx Cave, where they had the pocket knife stuck in the stalagmite, which caught my attention doing videos like I do. Well, the man in that cave starts talking about this bat problem.
And what happened is it dripped, it overflowed the barrel, and then the barrel became the base, and you couldn't find it because it was buried. And that was only 80 years.
Yeah.
And when you talk about 1 inch, 100 years, nah.
Right.
Which matched up with things that John was telling me. I'd like to tell you a little about it. right here on the screen. The white nose syndrome is what it's called. Now notice the dates on this. I always notice sixes. In February of 2006, bat white nose syndrome was first discovered in upstate New York. New York is often called by foreign countries a trendsetter city. Also, so is Los Angeles. Kim Clement used to say, they have their eye, the enemy has their eye on New York again. Also notice the numbers in this. This began in 2006. Now the allegation and what John was stating was it's awfully strange that they're closing down all these caves, stating that bats are dying off in the millions, and they're alleging that it's because tourists are going through the caves. So in John's mind, what don't they want me to see in the caves? Because people have been taking tours of caves for years, but suddenly all of the bats are dying. And it wasn't but a few years ago that we had the coronavirus come out of China. Of course, the lucky number in China is 6. In fact, 666 would be a very lucky number in China. We're all told to stand 6 feet apart. I used to joke about this in videos. You'd stand in a grocery store and the little dots would be 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. You would almost think a volcano god was about to awaken. And the story was that it all came from bats, or at least this was what was told and alleged. Bats that came specifically out of labs was the story behind the bats. White nose syndrome began in February of 2006, beginning in New York. By 2012, the Center for Biological Diversity reported 6.7 million estimated bat deaths. I guess if they went with 6.6 estimated, it would almost be going too far.
The hardness of the rock determines how many soda straws are coming through it.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear all that water running? Just think about that. That is running right through the ground and eroding. See, there's a lot of erosion going on.
Yeah.
Now,
Where does the underwater water come from? They create springs and things. So
Well-
you find springs, okay, so Eureka Springs, the hot springs,
well, you know, the earth, underneath the earth is a body of water larger than anything there is above the earth.
yes.
So all you got to do is take that into context. And then this Eureka Springs
So-
was founded because they claimed these were healing waters.
Yeah,
The Indian tribes used to meet here.
yeah.
They would war against each other and then would meet here peacefully just to hang around the healing waters. Same thing with hot springs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Now this, that's iron.
Yeah.
See how red it is?
Yeah,
Now look, it's cracked partially around. What's the two properties of iron? Hard and heavy.
yeah.
That is going to end up down there.
Now, I couldn't find any bat data for 2012, interesting number there, onwards, but here behind me on the screen, this is an image, this comes from Genesis Park, another creation ministry, this image behind me. This is Carlsbad Caverns, and the man there at the Onyx Cave, he was talking about, well, people would go, I remember even as a kid going to Carlsbad Caverns, and you sit down on this outdoor arena to watch the bats, which would look like billows of smoke coming out of the cave at night. Well, this man was worried because the bats had their own ecological system that they create, and that those clouds and billows of bats that would go out of the cave have become just a sprinkle of bats, leaving you're losing that many bats. Now, I don't know what that data is. It's missing in caves, as John was stating, or whatever cause they're shutting down, and the allegation is that it's tourists that are causing this bat problem, this white nose syndrome. Bats go by sonar. They find their way around by sonar, and they're very small little guys. So if they get woken up by any little thing, they're very sensitive to frequency. If they get woken up in any little bitty way, then they don't have the energy to fly out and make it back, and they end up falling down, running out of energy before they can make it back to the cave.
All right, let's go for it, man. Ready? I'm glad we put the extra money on the roof. So right now we're going
go and look at where the source of some of these springs, because the question is generally never asked, where does all of that water come from?
The North American State of the Bats Report, published, it's amazing such a thing exists, but I'm glad it does, published in 2023, delivered a startling statistic. 53% of bat species in North America are now at risk of complete extinction. This comes from October 16th of 2024. Now, when I think about bats and I think about volcanoes and volcano gods, the eruption of the ancient awakening of the volcano gods.
This is one of the hot springs in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, over by where they have the pools and things where people sit and bathe in the minerals. They have a whole string of what they call bathhouses, but you can see how you can see the heat coming off of the springs. It's in the shape, basically it looks like a small volcano where it's just puffing forth some steam and water coming forth from underneath the ground. We are in Pagosa Springs, and they boast that this is the world's deepest geothermal hot springs, is what they state. So, and here's a picture of what they call the mother spring, and you can smell the different minerals in the springs as they come out. Now, the Guinness Book of World Records actually came and they tried to find the bottom of these springs, and they couldn't find how deep the bottom of these springs. So if you look over here, the springs are what produces the hot water that's coming in these pools, and the smell of the different minerals. And they've got a whole list of minerals that are coming out: sodium, magnesium, sulfates, and sulfur.
What's the significance of that? Everything in here was formed by dripping water. Yeah. Now look, that's calcite. Look how white it is.
Yeah.
It's calcium carbonate. It's like a sister to milk.
You see the elephant?
Yeah.
And look at here.
Yeah.
This behind me here is called the Mother Spring, and is boasted as the world's deepest hot spring right here behind me. In other words, when they did testing into this spring, they could not find the bottom of it, begging the question, where do springs actually come from? If you go down in there, they cannot find the bottom. Even Guinness World Records and others trying to find the bottom of the spring could not find how deep that it goes and where the water comes from. Now let's walk over and see what people believed about this spring. The legend of Pagosa Hot Springs. Pagosa is a name given by the Ute Indians, the word Ute meaning paw, signifying water, and Gosa meaning boiling, otherwise meaning boiling waters. Now they believe these were healing waters back here.
Well, the alchemists came in to get this, and they mixed it with bear's teeth, crushed up bear's teeth.
Right.
And
this is the
so-
beginning of chemistry.
Beginning of chemistry. They were called
Alchemists.
alchemy in the 13th century.
And this kind of goes hand in hand with even occult stuff and things.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they scared people and said, well, stay out of that cave, it's dangerous. Just
There's
because
monsters
they
in
didn't
there.
want competition for this. So they created what they call cave lore. That's still dripping. See it dripping right there?
So what does it do? What's in it?
It's
I mean, is there
calcium
some reason?
carbonate.
Yeah.
Calcium carbonate. Like
Does
I
it
said,
actually have anything special property?
Well-
There's a lot of calcium.
yeah, it's got properties and that they use, and they don't just mix it with bear's teeth. They mix it with lots of other things, and that's how chemistry got started. Experimentation. Mix this, mix that, see what you got, see what you get.
This is called the Hall of Alchemy at the Houston Museum of Natural Sciences. Now, alchemy, what is in the name? So the modern field of chemistry, or your sciences today, have a lot of occult that underpins them. So the modern field of chemistry derives its name from the older term alchemy, which is what this exhibit, including all the way over here, actually is. So the term alchemy, the exact origin of this word is uncertain. One possibility is found in the Arabic al-kema, al meaning bee, and kema possibly from the late Greek term kema, transmuting metals, or possibly from Egyptian Coptic chem, fertile black soil, or possibly the Chinese chem-iya, gold-making juice, transmuting metals into gold. I'd like to take you right over here. In July of 1858, Captain John McComb, an engineer surveying routes for the U.S. Army, is credited as being the first white American to have found the spring, and stated that one day this will be mammoth resorts, like the resorts that are behind me. People come from all over the world to sit in these springs because of all the minerals in them. Now, in this legend of the Pagosa Hot Springs, it goes on to talk about the Indians that lived in this area. Let me tell you about that. The Indians believed the hot spring was a gift from the Great Spirit above. Legend has it that a plague fell on all these Indians that lived in this area, and all the skills of their medicine men had failed to stop the death. And many of the tribal members and leaders had died, and in desperation a council was called of the Indians on the banks of the San Juan River, the river right behind us. And a gigantic bonfire was built to send a message to what they believed were their gods for help. The tribal council danced and they prayed around the great fire until they were exhausted, and then they all slept. On awakening, they found the fire burned down, and in its place had appeared this pool of boiling water. This is what they believed. And by drinking from and bathing in the waters from the boiling hot springs, the Utes were healed. Now let's see, the legend. That's a legend that Indians had given for the springs, the mother spring, seen here behind me. Here you see some alchemy equipment here, and as we walk past, we've kind of got a castle window with a witch's or a wizard's brew going up here. Now, interestingly enough, your modern sciences have connections to the occult as well. I'd like you to take a look at what we get to at the very next exhibit as we come up, the Great Graphene, where they're going to do displays telling you about how graphene is not only the future of what will become integrated with quantum computing. These are nanoparticles, and speaking of graphene oxide and graphene and things, and humans merging with AI, so I'm going to lift up over here as well. Look at how it does that. Why don't you come on this side where you can watch it like this. Does it look a little bit like ancient magic there? It's going back and forth. Look at it dancing underneath my hands. So watch as it just kind of dances back and forth. I command it. Looks very witchy, doesn't it? I'd like to walk you over to another one of the exhibits right here as we move around. This is one that is quite controversial. So up the top here you see the word CERN.
Now that right there, that's a sinkhole in the making.
Yeah.
Now, Florida and California, they don't have a monopoly on sinkholes. I've lived here in 11 years, and twice I went downtown Eureka, and a parking lot had disappeared.
Wow. How deep is it?
It's not very deep yet, but it's going to cave in. Yeah. Every few years.
But I mean, right now you can see there's a hole
there's got water. It's getting really soft. You walk over there, I wouldn't want to walk over there and step down in it, actually.
Yeah, it would go through it.
Could go through.
How far down would it be underneath of it?
Oh, we don't know where that goes because this cave loops completely around it. There's kind of like a peninsula.
Oh, so it just goes into darkness.
Yeah, yeah. There's a peninsula
So
right
you-
here of
okay.
rock that we walk around to come down here.
Wow. Well, in Kim Clement's prophecies, his son-in-law crawling through caves with bats and pointing out these bat problems, well, in Kim's prophecies, he talked about two great E's, an earthquake and an eruption. Now, many have viewed these as metaphoric statements. Others view them, myself included, as literal. This all surrounded sections of prophecy. He said that the volcano will bring forth, this volcano that will erupt, and earthquake will cause the earth to yield of its produce. And I sat back and I thought, what does he mean? Does something about volcanic ash or an earthquake caused fertilization. And then as I began looking at the context, as I have of all these prophecies over the years, he started stating that you would have a great supply of oil here in the United States. This was long before Trump ever became president for the first time. But he talked about new energy arising in several different forms. And I realized that a portion of this, the entire context of the prophecies, is all about new energy that was arising. Thus, the produce would cause the earth, the volcano and earthquake would cause the earth to yield of its produce. Let me introduce you with my friend the bat to the awakening of the ancient volcano gods. Does the coming AI beast require as its power and fury, its energy, the very sulfuric molten fires of hell itself? A question to be asked when it comes to technology. And what is the root of much of our current technology? But a question to be asked is, are you the master of the technology, or is it the master of you? But whatever the case, in Kim's prophecies, he stated that this volcano, whatever it may be, was to be a sign. Perhaps to power the future AI of the planet requires the strength of the ancient volcano god. Here on the screen behind me, I have images from Pompeii. This is a volcano that went off in 79 AD. Now, it went off just after what's known as Vulcan's Day. Vulcan's Day, of course, not only is a character, the Vulcans from Star Trek, holding the symbol of the V up. Okay, so this is the little alien barbecue stand, and here I've got the alien. So here's the restroom. So you got the woman, man, the trans, the Bigfoot, and then the alien over here with the peace sign in its right hand. Whatever it's stating to all these things, whatever you are, just please wash your hands. The restroom. But Vulcan's Day, Vulcanalia, this festival celebrated on August 23rd, was dedicated to the god Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, and was a time to appease the forces of fire. These here are images of people that were burned alive by the Pompeii volcano. Now, as coincidence would have it, as I've covered quite often, this image here alone, at God in a nutshell. This here is Pan, this imagery, this is artwork that comes from the Herculean, from the elite homes of the time out there surrounding Pompeii, where this volcano went off. This, of course, is Pan, his ancient version, going all the way back to the Tower of Babel, and areas like Gobekli Tepe would be the form of Enkidu. Enkidu meaning, of course, Enki created. Enki, from the very start, you have documents, Enki and the World Order, or you could call it Enki's New World Order. He's been screaming this the entire time. Well, Enki and his documents, one of the Enki's Me's, these are the secret knowledge for the kings, as he wants population reduction. Enki screams this all the way through the ancient texts, going all the way to the Roman times, and the time that this artwork found at Pompeii, where people were burned alive the day after Vulcan's Day, the day they were worshiping the volcano god, erupted. The god that may be needed to power your AI coming beast, perhaps. Mount Vesuvius eruption occurred on August 24th, just one day after Vulcan's Day. I wonder what's happening to all the bats. Just on the Arkansas side,
just a ways out of Branson, Missouri. All right.
Now y'all jump out. Go ahead, jump out. Anyway, you're still filming, right?
Yeah.
Come on. I'm going to back up.
Because you're gonna have to go in this water in huge pools. I'm talking like lakes.
Yeah.
Lakes underground of natural, fresh, clear water. As clear as you can get it. And we'll go this way.
Okay. All right. How big are the pockets, John, that are underneath the ground, underneath of this?
You have rooms that are thousands of feet. I mean,
Well, do they know how big it is? You said something like 60 miles or
60
something.
miles, yeah.
Or something
This
underneath the
cave
ground. This is what they speculate. How would you even know?
Well, they put dye. Like I was saying, they put dye in this one because this was going to be they were going to build a super hydrogen collider right here.
Yeah.
But they ended up building it in East Tennessee. And they were going to knock this system down. So they put dye in the water upstream to see how far it goes. And they never found out
How far it goes.
where it actually goes.
Okay.
Now this is slick right here, watch out.
I'll get you out in a minute. I'm going to back up. Let me get this glass out of it.
You got a winch on the front?
No, but I'll back it out. I just don't want y'all to be in there because it's going to get wet.
Okay.
Who stays here?
All right, so right here is one of the springs.
Okay.
Now, if you'll notice, the water is coming out of the rock. Now, we'd have to dig down to see exactly where it
Okay.
came from. But you notice this water's up here and it's flowing this way.
Right.
All right. So right in here is where you can see water flowing out of the rock into this way.
You've got the water flowing out of these rocks. Literally, it just is coming out of the ground, and you can literally see that it's already flowing out of the rocks in there. I want you to notice that you can see it coming out of the rocks down there. See it coming out of the ground. So it's dry over here, and this spring coming out of the Ozark Mountains, it's emerging forth from literally the ground, and then it runs downhill. Why don't you, can you bring that camera over here and just literally, and just show. So this is what a cave looks like without a guided tour.
Yeah,
Well, I guess you
it's
are-
a wild cave.
You are, I call it a wild cave?
Wild cave.
Okay. Cool. All right.
And we're gonna go just right over there.
Okay.
And we'll see some crawdads in the water.
Okay. And there are animals that live in this cave system that have never been,
Oh yeah.
that are,
This cave system right here is so unique.
yeah.
It's
That,
so big. It's got its own biological system here in here.
yeah, let's go look at those stalactites real quick. Oh, there are more over there. Oh, those are they're tights, right?
Yeah.
The tights hang.
Tights come from the top.
And the mites come from the bottom.
There's a couple of ones over here.
Okay, here's some right here. So here's actual stalactites that are here, right there on the top there. And all right, we'll go back over the drawings. Okay. So this is when you're in a wild cave in Tennessee, and John has a knack for these kind of things. In fact, John has found more historical stuff in Tennessee than I think very often the state of Tennessee has. Okay.
Now these stones
Yeah.
aren't that slick.
Okay.
That's a flow stone, and you can step on it. This one right here, and you won't slip.
What does a flow stone mean?
It's just where the water's flowed for years and
Over
years.
the stone.
And has created these pockets.
Yeah.
And usually there's
Seeing something living in there?
usually there's a crawfish or two. Now the crawfish down here are completely white and they're blind.
Really? So they're their own kind of creature. They've just abandoned eyesight
Yeah.
because
They
it's
have
so
no
dark.
eyes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There's a cool formation right over here.
Okay.
You know, I find it interesting that these creatures in the caves, they've been under the earth in the darkness so long that they're blind. They've been in the darkness for so long that they've even given up on the ability to see. They've even lost their eyes. I think that was the direction that you may have been heading. But in Kim Clement's prophecies, he was talking about a great awakening, but not an awakening to darkness. You've already been down that path. You know where that path goes. But he was also talking about a serpent, an ancient serpent that was hidden, that would be brought out, but a very specific kind of serpent, a python spirit. A python slowly moves around its prey and strangles its prey, is what a python does. Now, he had this section of darkness in the prophecies, a section of blindness. But then there came a moment in the prophecies where he said the scales are reptilian, where the scales fell off of the eyes. Now, sometimes you can be so deep in the heart of something, so deep in the cave, that if you just back out a little bit, sometimes if you're in the center of something, it's the hardest to see it. But if you just take in a deep breath, pause, and step back, remember these words, you can see the thing that has been encircling you. Wait. There was an awakening in these prophecies, but it wasn't an awakening to darkness, almost like the echo, the ringing in your ears. The echo coming through that cave, if you stop and hit pause just long enough to listen to it, almost like a voice screaming from another dimension. Time to wake up. He said, I saw these scales falling from eyes. They were awake. More than this, he stated in the process, they had become one. These moments, he said, would cause the nation to shake. But the shaking will be good for America. You're about to embark on a journey that you have never embarked upon before. Sometimes you have to be shaken a little bit to wake up. Why don't we pull backwards a little out of the mud, out of the dead center of the magic Python circle. I think we're coming on the parts of the story where darkness is to be afraid of you. Boo.
How does it work? They hibernate. They cling to the ceiling upside down. They got just enough fat to make it through the winter. One of them gets it. His esophagus and everything gets covered with this white slime. They can't breathe. They start wiggling. They burn up all their body fat. They starve to death and fall to the floor.
Yeah.
Since 2006, we've lost 60 to 70% of our bat population.
Wow.
No more agave, no more avocados. They're pollinators. Down in Mexico, they pollinate mangoes and other fruits.
Wow, that's what they do.
And they're the only living flying mammal. We don't have any more pterodactyls. They're the only ones. Now the neat thing about them is this. Birds are like us. They got a joint here, a joint here, and a joint here when they fly. Okay? Bats don't. They're like your hands.
Yeah.
And scientists have taken and they made drones. And they can fly them into pipes, into narrow places, and using cameras like yours.
Yeah.
And they're just they're fabulous. They're
The
just,
bats.
they're great.
Now, and the bats talk by sonar.
Sonar.
So they're using like frequencies, which is
They should make a noise, not like
Yeah.
your hair.
Yeah.
Now, if you had a woman's hairdo, she could probably get by. But the sonar will not bounce off a hair.
Oh wow.
I was in a cave with a guy.
That's why they get tangled in the hair.
Yes, I was in a cave with a guy, and he was guiding us, and he started screaming and crawling back to me, and he had a bat caught in his hair. It took us 5 minutes to get that bat out of his hair.
So, but and dolphins might do that too. right?
Dolphins are highly, highly intelligent.
Yeah, but so they do a sonar frequency thing on the walls. And
Yeah,
and
and it
that's how
bounces off, and they can tell by the way it comes back as to what they're flying into, how dense it is. Here's another thing. I told you they get in clusters. They're
Yeah.
very sociable. They like to get right next to each other.
Yeah.
Okay, since the white nose syndrome has become so prevalent, they quit clustering. You talk
Wow.
about animals' intelligence. Now in Texas, you've got your rattlesnake roundup. Have you heard this?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what you're about to tell me about it. But
Well-
I've heard of the rattlesnake roundup.
They got to go to this one place to get the rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
And they find them because they rattle.
Yeah.
Guess what? They quit
I was
rattling.
looking up and not down.
How intelligent are animals? Very intelligent.
Yeah.
Now we're going to go up here. This has been 40 years.
Okay. Did you know that cave systems are all connected? One of the ways that they will find how long or how far a cave system goes is they'll put a ink ray dye in with little bots or little nanobots, I believe, in it. And you can put in this dye all the way in Tennessee and it will pop up all the way in Carlsbad Caverns. Right here on the screen behind me, I have what's called volcanic white gold. Articles like this one have been popping up in this year of 2025. A lithium deposit valued at 1.5 trillion. He said that new energy would arise and your debt would be completely wiped away. He also talked about the emergence of a new party. A lithium deposit valued at, now this is volcanic white gold. White nose syndrome with the bats. 1.5 trillion has been discovered in Oregon. Articles about this began popping up in roughly 2025. Bats are creatures of frequency. They're little sonar guys is really what they are. And they put off a sonar and they bounces back, and they only have about the energy they need to fly out and fly back in, and they're an important part of your ecological system, as it turns out, one that we don't pay a lot of attention to. But they work with frequencies. Now here behind me, these are the stones of the high priest's breastplate. Been doing some work looking at the frequencies of the tabernacle, which is one of the videos we just did, by God in a Nutshell, and examining the frequencies of these stones combined with gold and different models of the shape of this God's house, his tabernacle, leading to his temple. Well, right here, so this is at the Onyx Cave, or the Onyx Cave. Right here I have an onyx stone, a little black onyx stone that I actually got out there. Now, onyx is for Ephraim. Now, both Ephraim and Manasseh, Kim prophesied that you were in a Joseph period. And then you go through some Exodus moments in all of this. Awakening of the volcano gods. Both Ephraim and Manasseh are considered part of the tribe of Joseph, which was divided into two tribes, one led by each son. But these boys were actually born in Egypt. Now, we were just at a Pentecost event at my friend Robert Agee's home. And Amy Sever, her husband Steve, had pointed out to me that this passage that I had never focused on before in the book of Isaiah, when I think about black stones. And it's from Isaiah 60, verse 7. Those are interesting numbers as well. And this passage describes a future gathering of resources and people to rebuild Jerusalem, where they will offer their best possessions, including livestock, to God, and God will then glorify his temple and his church. So
This right here is called a water bridge. So if you look down there, I'm going to say that that's probably maybe 5 foot deep. It's not over your head, but you can see how clear this water is. It comes out of a spring. You've never seen water. I've never seen water this clear anywhere.
The black spots.
all right.
Normally I see him.
Okay.
I named him Earl.
Okay, so tell me that again. So there's a special cave salamander that you
Yeah,
found
just in
there?
these caves, they're orange with black spots. And usually one's right there. I named him Earl. Look, here's something cool.
It specifically mentions that the flocks, and I found this interesting because Joseph's 2 sons that were both blessed by Abraham, Trump talks about these Abrahamic accords. It specifically mentions that the flocks of Kedar and the rams of Naboth will be gathered and offered as sacrifice on God's altar, signifying a time of abundance and offering to God. This verse speaks of his renewed glory and prosperity for God's people and his house. This is the onyx stone right here. It's just one of the stones on the high priest's breastplate called the ephod.
Look, here's something cool. You want to see a face?
Yeah.
Somebody sometime carved that in there.
Hey, let me see it again. Somebody sometime carved this. What is it? Let me
It's
see.
a face.
Yeah, they did. They sure did. Look at that.
And people put their handprints
That's actually carved in there. Look at that. That's in the heart of this cave. That literally is a face, John.
I also find it fascinating that in these prophecies you had knights that were fighting for you in your dark nights, like Batman or Batmen. On this side is the Aleph. On this side is the Yod, the right arm of the Creator. The Aleph and the Bet, that's where you get the word, alphabet. And you're actually fighting right now for your, not just your very survival, but your bet, your home. But if you have two different sides, one of the things that God says he hates most is imbalanced weights and measures. But on one side of these scales, speaking of Hebrew letters, there are 22 Hebrew letters. 22 Hebrew letters, beginning with the Aleph and ending with the Tav, a cross, a X, a sign or mark. Now, in the prophecies, there's a lot of talk about these explosive volcanic moments, and I'm brought to think about, well, in Star Wars, the gears on a spaceship. You had the giant Death Star with its dark eye focusing in a planet home destroyer is what it was. But even when Darth Vader, his tractor beam is pulling you into the ship, the advice from the droids is always the same: to lay off on the main throttle. Now, in these prophecies, there's a lot of talk about explosive shaking moments ahead. And I'm brought to think about the scales. One of the things that God says he hates most is imbalanced weights and measures. Here on the back screen, I have Hebrew letters on both sides. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and they are all symbols with specific meanings. In fact, it's stated, is it not stated, in fact, by the Hebrews that when the Mashiach comes, he will not only interpret the letters, but the spaces between the letters. In fact, in this story, in the end of this story, like a David and Goliath fight, he will take a simple stone. Remember the name. Take note of all these little words that I'm giving you. They are gems. I'm quoting Kim Clement there. But on one end, dark cube, what does it do?
We'll need to go in there and look at it.
Well, let's go look at it. All right. And this would be Hitler's dark cube.
Yep. I'll show you.
This time period that you're in is commonly compared to the parting of the waters of the Red Sea, or the X that marks the spot. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The first letter is the Aleph. Aleph and Bet. Bet means home, like you're fighting for your home.
We're going to be going the full length of the 14 miles underneath the ground. And then we've got some gear for going underwater that John has brought. And apparently there's some kind of a creature under there, very similar to the Loch Ness Monster. And, well, people describe it that way. Normally they're scared to get in the water because of the creature. It'll take its head out and it'll bite stuff. If you throw a big piece of chicken there, it'll come out of the water and you literally grab it. People have spotted it on spotlights, but in this occasion, John sort of got a plan together. We're actually going to go in with the creature and see if we can film it underneath the water.
Now, I was partially joking with John there when I'm talking about a creature or a monster or a beast living in the heart of the cave system there. Well, who knows what lives in the heart of abyss? In fact, what I'm brought to think of when I think about beasts coming from the heart of the abyss, deep in a cave, I'm brought to think of the passages of Revelation 17, where a great beast is brought forth before the world. And the whole world was astonished by this beast that was brought out. And then a great whore that sat on many, many waters. And in her hand was a cup of blood, a cup of abominations and blood. The blood of God's children was in her hand. And the great whore, the whore of Babylon, was run off before the great beast. What I'm on the screen is to take a journey into the abyss of the pre-flood world, the exciting abyss, a journey. In fact, it's not an abyss. It's like a shepherd's staff on the other side over here, the lamed, a staff for the righteous. Pre-Flood World is a film available over at God in a Nutshell, at godinanutshell.com. This is called the Death Pose, by the way.
But this is a very important exhibit. Heisenberg was Hitler. I call him Hitler's Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
He was in charge of the nuclear program for Hitler to try to develop an atomic bomb.
Right.
And believe it or not, a lot of people don't believe it, they never got the atomic weapon.
The Germans.
The Germans didn't.
So the Nazis would be able to.
This is the Nazis. The Heisenberg exhibit, this is his reactor he was working on. This is a big chain of uranium cubes. That cube behind you over there.
Let's take a look at it. This is the Heisenberg cube.
That came out of this chain.
Okay.
That's the real.
That's an actual one.
That's 99% pure uranium-238.
Many of the words that Kim Clement gave surrounding what I believe is this time period that you're in, so the Spirit of the Lord would just fill Kim Clement and he would be doing praise and worship. God says, I inhabit the praises, the frequency, the aroma of my people. And while he was singing and praising the Lord, he would give words about this time period. He would refer to them, interestingly enough, as gems. Notice all these little words. They are gems. He will take a simple stone. Also in the prophecies, well, when we're talking about the future, well, in the Back to the Future movies, the number was always 88 was the number to go back in time. And of course the license plate on the car that spun around in Back to the Future Part 1 was the license plate that said out of time. And over here you had the flux capacitor, and it makes the interesting shape of a Y. And of course the car in those movies had a flux capacitor which was shaped like a Y, a valve. Valve is the symbol of a tent peg like you would use to hold in the tabernacle, or a nail, a valve. It's the number 6, like there were 3 nails, 3 valves, 3 6s, one in Jesus' hands, each hand, and one in the feet.
Hitler was going to use heavy water.
Yeah.
And so this is hanging over a heavy water pit. But he never got a chain reaction.
I just noticed here, so he had 664. Maybe he was only too short. That would be 666 if you went. I just found that interesting.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
They're dark cubes with 6.
Germany surrendered on May the 8th, 45, and
yes.
Had you known these secrets before we did, you might have won the war. But you failed. And now we can tell you why you failed. We can tell you some of the things you wanted to know.
Now, in the coming hours, you might have some crossed wires. In archaeology, X always marks the spot. This time period is also referred to as an Exodus time period. Now, following the Exodus, there was water that came from a rock, was there not? But speaking of X's and marking the spot, well, a simple stone. And Goliath had 4 brothers. He had 5 stones. He only needed 1. I would like to thank you for watching this presentation on the cave mystery and a little bit about bats and the properties of stones and minerals. Sometimes you know, I have strong feelings about returning to the basics. Sometimes you just got to get your hands in the earth. And not all frequencies are used to, like uranium, to destroy. Some frequencies, and by the way, those can be used to protect, but a lot of frequencies can be used to heal. They've been taking the stones of the high priest's breastplate and doing experimentation with them. You can find more about that over at highpriestbreastplate.com. Once again, that's highpriestbreastplate.com. Now, on the other side of the screen here, I have a symbol of the het. It's what makes your modern day, well, it's number 8. 8 is the number of new beginnings, a nexus point. The het is where you get your infinity symbol from. Now, if we were talking about let's replace our bat here with our high priest breastplate and the stones and the frequencies, the minerals and gems. Remember all these words, they are gems. Well, if we were to take Kim Clement's voice screaming through from another dimension, well, the tagline of his prophecies and his ministry was, I see you in the future. I see you in the future. And you look much better than you do right now. But this other lever here, why don't we push it forward? So while we lay off on the main thruster, what if we throw this one in gear to 88? Okay, here we go. On this side, I'm gonna lay off of the main thruster, shake us out of the tractor beam. You better buckle onto your seatbelts, because on this side, we're going to throw this gear, the Y. Always ask why. The Vav, the tent peg or nail, like a sword, an Excalibur stuck in a cave stone. The 88. You better buckle your seatbelts. You're about to see some serious
I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. God bless every last one of you and your families on the other side of the screen.